Why, hello, folks. We are back with another Helminth build guide. Yeah, and this time it's for Rhino, which is cool. Because, you know, I've actually been sort of like struggling for a while figuring out what to do with Rhino and like how to improve him in the Helminth system. Because his gameplay is like very straightforward, right? You use his number 2 to make yourself immortal, and you use his number 3 to give yourself a damage buff, and then situationally you can use like either his number 1 or number 4 for different things. But it's kind of like tricky to figure out like how to actually push him up to the next level, and you know, take him up to high-end content. Usually Rhino is a very popular beginner Warframe. He helps you out a ton when you're just going through the star chart, because you can just tank everything with him. But he sort of trails off, and people abandon him and move on to other Warframes when they get to more endgame stuff, because he doesn't have anything that can sort of compete with like the real heavy hitters. So it's kind of tricky to figure out some way of getting him there. And the reason for that is because the Helminth system doesn't really have any ability that could give Rhino what he wants, which is something that massively lets him sort of like upscale his damage output. Most of the Helminth system is just like sort of support abilities, or abilities that help you with grouping, or with healing, or with mobility, or with whatever. But not so much just dealing a million billion damage. You have stuff like thermal sunder or whatever, which is kind of for like clearing low-level content, but that doesn't work in high-level stuff either. So there isn't really anything for Rhino in the Helminth system that gives him what he needs, that sort of like patches up his big weakness, which is that he can't put out enough damage on higher levels. Until now, because suddenly there is. And the reason why is because DE has just now put out a new augment mod for Zephyr's Airburst. And that one is actually really interesting. You can get it from 2 different syndicates. I got it from a new Loka. There's another syndicate that also sells Zephyr's augment mods. And what this augment mod does, which is very nice to know, it's this one, Airburst rounds. Each enemy hit by Airburst increases secondary damage, that is your pistol damage, by 25% for 14 seconds. So each enemy hit, this stacks. And it caps at 500%, which at 100% ability strength means you have to hit 20 enemies at the same time to get the full buff. At 225% strength, you can see that it damage increases 56% per enemy hit, which means you need to hit like 9 or 10 enemies, and you will get the full buff. Which isn't all that hard to do if you're playing like something like Steel Path Survivor or whatever, where enemies are like very tightly grouped together. So what it means is, after you've cast Airburst, you have a period of time where your pistol is gonna do 500% more damage, and this is not anything to sneeze at. This is a lot of damage. So, just to demonstrate real quickly here, and I'll explain also why this is specifically good on Rhino. First, we'll cast Airburst and group everyone together like this, and now you can see in the top right corner of the screen that I have a buff here for 500% more damage. Important to note is you can refresh this, and you don't need to hit like another 9 enemies. I can just hit 1 enemy here. And that will refresh the duration, and will keep it at the max buff. So it snapshots what your current max value is, and then you can just recast the ability to refresh it. So once you have the 500% damage, you can just keep that 500% damage by just casting Airburst like once every 15 seconds or so. Which is nice. And then you can just shoot them once with your secondary, and they go bye-bye. Sometimes you need to shoot them twice. Now, obviously, this comes down to your secondary. you just, for this build to work, what you want to do is you just want to use the strongest pistol you have. And this is just going to turn that pistol into a goddamn powerhouse. Worth noting is that this doesn't work with everything. Airburst rounds, for example, it doesn't work with Mesa's regulators, I think. It doesn't give them increased damage, because I guess they don't count as secondary weapons in the true sense. Me, I'm using a Catch Moon. I'll show you the build for my secondary, because, like, this isn't important for the build, it's just, like I'm telling you, just use the strongest secondary you have. There are a couple of good ones you can use. You can use, like, a Tomb Finger, you can use a Catch Moon, you can use a Kuva Nukor, but I don't think that's the best one to use. I don't think, because the Kuva Nukor is not a weapon you use for damage, you use it to just stack status effects. For actual damage is not the strongest secondary. So if you're gonna use a secondary for a pure damage output, then something like the Catch Moon is much better. You can use the Epitaph, that's also fantastic. You can use the Spore Laser. So yeah, it's just a classic heat viral build, and I have a really strong Riven mod for the Catch Moon, so it works very well. And also I've shown a previous video about the new impact status mods, Hemorrhage for pistols and Internal Bleeding for rifles, showing you which weapons that this mod works very well for. They work very well for the Catch Moon, because the Catch Moon has guaranteed impact procs on its hits. So just you get big damage, you get big slash procs that kills everything. Play some Corpus Railjack until you get to this mod and put it in either your Catch Moon or your Tomb Finger, and you can just go to town and shred everything that exists. Now, there's another reason why I want to do this specifically for Rhino, and that is because Rhino actually is helped a lot by having a grouping ability. Now, previously you would probably have used something like Chorus and Snare instead, because as far as grouping abilities go, Airburst is probably the worst one. It's not a particularly good grouping ability, but it's cheap, you can cast it pretty often, and now it has the secondary utility of also just doing millions and millions and billions of damage on your secondary, which is exactly what Rhino wants. But Rhino has other cool augment mods. He has the Ironclad Charge augment, which means you can stack armor by running through a bunch of enemies. And when you cast your Iron Skin, your second ability to bump your armor, it takes into account what your armor value is to determine what sort of armor value you're gonna get. So if I just stand here and cast Iron Skin, then we'll see up in the top right with my ability strength and my armor and whatever, I get 6,000 armor, which isn't that much. But if I dash through them with my number 1 and this augment, and then I cast Iron Skin, now we'll see that I have 60,000 armor instead. So that's basically like an additional 60,000 health that your opponents have to get through before you actually start taking damage. Now, for this to work and be viable in the Steel Path, the problem with Iron Skin normally is you can't recast it until it runs out. So it leaves you very vulnerable at the end there. But I just did. It is because I'm using another augment mod, which is the Iron Shrapnel augment, which lets you recast Iron Skin, and it also knocks down enemies around you, so it gives you like some safety while you're doing it. So this is your classic Rhino build using 3 augment mods. Don't worry about it. It works. He's so tough and so tanky. He doesn't need all that much from his abilities otherwise. I could add another format to this build up in this slot, which means I wouldn't have to use Steel Charge. I could use something else in the Aura mod slot in that case, in which I would probably use Corrosive Protection, reduce enemy armor, do even more damage. Well, it's fine for now. I didn't feel like changing the Aura slot. So it's a bit different from how you'd normally build a Rhino. Normally a Rhino would want like even more power strength. But here, to make everything work, I want to get Umbral Fiber in. I want to get Umbral Intensify in. Don't care about Vitality because you're not going to be taking health damage. You don't have a large energy pool with Rhino, so I'm using an Arcane Energize. I'm also using the Zeneric Focus School, so that I can use my my Energizing Dash, which is very important for energy generation. So what that means is you go into Operator mode and you do a dash, and as you can see, that's gonna give you energy. Very important, you need this, because you don't have a large energy pool. You want to make sure that your roar is always active, you want to make sure your iron skin is always active. Constantly casting Airburst, constantly casting the Rhino charge whenever you feel like refreshing your iron skin. So you're using all 4 abilities, and you're kind of spamming all 4 as well. It's a super active playstyle, which is super fun. So basically the loop is that you airburst enemies, you dash through them, you get your armor, you get your roar, you group enemies up, and then you can just shoot 1 or 2 shots, anything is gonna die, refresh your airburst, shoot 1 or 2 shots, everything is gonna die, refresh your airburst, shoot 1 or 2 shots, everything is gonna die. Make sure that your roar is always active. It's got a pretty long duration with this build, but whenever it runs out, just recast it immediately. And as soon as... And like, just keep track of your armor value in the top right, and keep track of where it's at. Currently it's at like 39,000, which is fine. If I ever feel like enemies are whittling me down too much and I don't have enough armor, all I do is group enemies together, I remove my iron skin, I charge, I recast my iron skin, and bam, I'm immortal again. So you just loop all of these things. Whenever armor gets low, you recast your iron skin. Whenever roar runs out, you recast roar. Whenever your airburst damage buff is about to run out, you recast airburst. And you use your charge whenever you want to recharge your armor. Charge 2 enemies first so that your armor buff gets bigger. And you can pretty much just go forever with this. You can pretty much just go forever. Like, you can just tank most things. Enemies can't get through you until they run out of armor, and with this, like, you're not gonna run out of armor. The only way you're gonna run out of armor is if you run out of energy. But once and again, you also do, like, you just do a Zeneric dash, and you start getting your energy back. So it's just a rhythm. It's a rhythm of like armor, airburst, roar, Zeneric dash, armor, airburst, roar, Zeneric dash. All the while you're just firing pew 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 away with your secondary and killing everything. Super cool. Works super well. Now obviously, since this is not like an infinitely scaling combination, you can't go forever with this. You can't go up until like level 9,000 enemies or whatnot, but you can easily go like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours in Steel Path Survival, and you're still gonna be just killing everything left and right and being able to tank everything. So that's gonna be fine, and that's gonna, you know, cover the basis for almost everyone who plays this game. And hey man, it's a nostalgia factor to this, because everyone has played Rhino at some point. Everyone used Rhino to get through the star chart at some point. And then you stopped using Rhino because, you know, you moved on. You moved on with your life. And it's like, sorry Rhino, we had a good thing back then, but I'm a different person now. But now you can go and just revive that old fling. Take Rhino back out for a new spin, because guess what? Now Rhino can charge right through the steel path, and it's kind of nice to be able to build like a end game sort of steel path endurance build that doesn't center around a melee weapon, because that's how you otherwise always do it. Just build a big melee and then just go to town with it. That's a bit boring. So now we actually have like an ability to use our gunplay, and you fire pew 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 and kill everything just as fast and melt everything left and right. So, like I said, the Catch Moon is not mandatory. I'm just using it because it's the strongest secondary I have for damage. If you have a different secondary that you prefer using, sure, use it. It's gonna work so well with Airburst. And this is gonna find its home in a bunch of different Warframes now, because this, like, suddenly the Helminth system has an ability that can massively increase damage output for Warframes that need that. And there are a couple of Warframes out there that can use that, like Warframes like Necros, for example, would love a big, huge, stupid damage dealing ability. So yeah. Airburst Rhino is my first sort of attempt to use that ability. It felt like a natural fit. Grouping enemies up works so well with stacking armor, and now it also works with stacking damage. So you got survivability and damage output, which is neat. And we also got this cool new Dex skin for Rhino with the 8th anniversary celebrations, so you can go out and just maul everything in style as well. Yeah, that's the build, people. Rhino, he's cool again. You know, he never stopped being cool, but now he's even cooler.